Welcome back, guys. In today's episode, I'm sharing 10 true disturbing stories from people who grew up in Appalachia. Get ready for chilling stories and a nightmare that stays with you long after the video ends. But before we continue, if you're new here, make sure to subscribe and don't forget to like and share. Thank you all. Now, let's begin. We lived way out in a 2-story farmhouse, tucked into a hollow in eastern Kentucky, down this narrow, winding road that GPS never recognized. Our closest neighbor was an older couple nearly 2 miles away, and most of the land behind us was just dense government forest. I had 2 younger sisters and a stepdad who worked long shifts at a sawmill. Mom homeschooled us and sold jams and bread at the farmer's market on weekends. It could be boring, sure, but it also felt safe, familiar. I liked the stillness, especially in the evenings when the woods got that muted hum and the air smelled like moss and sawdust. It was all just normal. Until the spring, everything started to feel off. Mom had to head out of town for a few days to stay with her sister in Harlan. Aunt Beth had just had surgery and needed some help around the house. So it was me, my stepdad, and my sisters holding down the fort. Not that it was a big deal. I was used to being the responsible one when Mom wasn't around. I had my usual list of chores: feed the goats, check the garden, make sure the coop was shut. Basic stuff. I've been doing it for years. But that week, things started to shift. At first, it was just the goat pen gate. One morning, I found Clover, our smallest goat, outside the pen chewing on the corner of a feed bag. I figured someone forgot to latch it. My youngest sister, Lacey, had a habit of being scatterbrained, so it was easy to assume it was her. I latched it up again, double-checked it just to be sure, and moved on. Next morning, same thing, gate wide open. Clover was out again, only this time, 2 others were near the edge of the woods. That's when I started paying attention. By the 3rd morning, I had already checked the latch twice the night before, once before dinner and once right before bed. It was secure both times. But when I went out at sunrise, the gate was open like someone had just walked through it, and one of the goats was gone. That's when I told my stepdad. He just shrugged and said, maybe some dumb kid was playing around, but no one messed around out there. You didn't just wander onto someone's land in the hollow unless you wanted trouble. That night, I stayed up, sat on the porch with Clyde, our dog. He was a mix of who knows what, but big and solid and usually too lazy to bother with anything but squirrels. Around midnight, he tensed up, ears forward, body stiff, this low growl rumbling out of him. I'd never heard him growl like that, not playful, not warning. It was something deeper. He stared past the shed, into the woods. I grabbed the flashlight and scanned the tree line, heart thudding a little faster than I'd admit. I even walked out to the goat pen, light bouncing off the dew-covered grass. The gate was shut. Everything looked fine. But Clyde didn't move from the porch. He was trembling, eyes locked on the same spot in the trees. That shook me more than anything. I locked every door and sat awake in the kitchen until the sun came up. And sure enough, when I stepped outside, gate open, 1 goat missing. No sign of a break or damage, just open, like someone had calmly walked in and out. Later that day, I found something behind the chicken coop. It was tucked halfway under a bush. A weird little nest-looking thing. Tangled feed bags, sticks, some hay, and a piece of flannel I recognized. It was my stepdad's old shirt, or half of it anyway, torn clean down the middle. And tracks, not normal ones. Not boots, not bare feet either. Something in between. The toes were shaped like a person's, but longer, and the way they were spaced, it didn't match how anyone walks. The stride was too wide, too crooked. I stood there just staring at them, holding that piece of shirt in one hand like it was going to give me an answer. I didn't tell the girls. I just said not to go near the woods or the animals for a while. Friday, it got worse. I was walking back from checking the mailbox. It was maybe a 10-minute walk down the gravel drive, and when I came around the house, I saw the back door wide open. My sister Anna was inside crying. She said someone knocked. When she looked out, no one was there, but the knob rattled like someone was trying it, and then it just opened. She swore she didn't touch it. That rattled me. Stepdad wasn't home yet. I took Clyde and checked every room, even the attic, but he only lost his mind near the crawl space, barking, pacing in circles. He wouldn't even go near the door to it. That night, I was done playing nice. I nailed the goat pen shut, then took one of the old trail cams from the shed and mounted it on the fence post, facing the woods. It was one of those basic, motion-activated ones. I made sure it had a fresh card and full battery. Then I stayed up again, this time in my room with the window cracked just enough to hear anything unusual. Next morning, I grabbed the camera before breakfast and plugged it into the laptop. There was one clip, just a few seconds, but it wrecked me. 3:15 a.m., something stepped into frame. It was tall but slouched, its shoulders hunched forward like it was too big for its own body. Skin pale, almost gray in the camera's night mode, arms too long, almost touched its knees. It moved weird, like its joints didn't work right. Twitchy, awkward. Then it just stopped at the edge of the pen, and it stared straight into the camera. Not like it noticed the light or the sound, more like it already knew where it was. Like it had been waiting for it. Then it turned and disappeared back into the woods. I deleted the footage, no hesitation. I didn't even think. I didn't want it on the computer. Didn't want to explain it, didn't want to see it again. Sunday, we stayed home. Stepdad sat out on the porch most of the day with his rifle across his lap. Said he saw something moving in the trees but couldn't get a good shot. Mom got back Monday. We didn't tell her. Stepdad said it was better not to worry her, and I agreed. But he started locking all the doors by sundown. That had never been a thing before. Whatever it was, it stopped coming. The gates stayed shut. The animals stayed put. Eventually, things just settled. But we moved a few months later anyway, into town, closer to people, less trees. A year after we left, I went back to grab a couple boxes we left behind in the crawl space. The house was already looking rough. The roof over the porch had collapsed, and vines had swallowed up the shed. I had to force the crawl space door open with a crowbar. Down there, in the dust and old insulation, I saw it. That flannel shirt. The same one I'd seen torn and twisted into that makeshift nest behind the coop. Only now, it wasn't ripped. It was folded, neatly. Sleeves tucked, collar straight. Sitting right in the center of the floor like someone had placed it there on purpose. And it smelled like wood smoke, strong, fresh, like a fireplace had been burning just that morning. But no one had lit that fireplace in over a year. I didn't touch it. Didn't even go all the way in. Just backed out, shut the door, locked the house up, and drove off. I haven't been back since. I live 4 states away now. Apartment building, 2nd floor. No trees nearby. I still check every lock twice before bed. And I don't go near windows after dark. We were living in this narrow valley deep in southern West Virginia. 2 thick ridge lines boxed us in on either side, and in between was just woods, old trails, and a scattering of houses that had seen better decades. Our place sat off an old mining path that had mostly been swallowed up by weeds and time. The map didn't even bother showing the road anymore. Unless you had family there or made a real bad wrong turn, you weren't ending up in our hollow. My walk to the bus stop was about a 1/4 mile, straight downhill. It passed by my uncle's barn, which looked like it was losing a slow fight with gravity, and ran alongside a fence that hadn't kept anything in or out since before I was born. Most mornings, it was quiet. Just me, the trees, and the sound of my boots crunching over gravel and wet leaves. That spring, things started getting strange. It was small at first. I walked out one morning and saw feathers laid out on the top porch step. 5 of them, not clumped up or scattered, lined up in a perfect row. White and gray, soft-looking, no blood or mess, just clean. At first, I figured it was a bird that got torn up nearby. I mentioned it to my older brother Clay and he laughed it off. Asked if I was sleepwalking and setting up weird displays for myself. I wasn't. Then it happened again. 5 more, same setup. Always before school, always dry. Then feathers stopped, and something else showed up. Teeth, little ones. maybe raccoon or possum, I don't know. 5 again, laid out just like before. My mom tried to tell herself it was some animal dragging pieces around, but there was no gore, no hair, no signs of a kill, just 5 tiny yellowed teeth. I didn't touch them, not after that. After the teeth, the things kept coming. Every couple mornings, something new. 5 buttons, all brown, all the same size. 5 matchsticks, unburnt. 5 nails. 5 cloudy glass marbles. Always 5. Always in a line, and always waiting for me when I opened the door. I stopped mentioning them after a while. I'd just step over them and go. Then I started noticing someone in the woods. It wasn't like they were stalking me. They weren't even moving, just standing, off the path, half hidden by the trees. Sometimes in the morning when I walked to the bus, sometimes when I was outside helping with firewood or dumping scraps. I never saw them move, just still, watching, and never close. Always far enough that I couldn't make out details, just enough to know they were there. One morning, I squinted and thought I saw part of a face, pale and still. I blinked and it was gone. Probably a trick of the light. That's what my mom said anyway. Your eyes are just playing games with you. My dad, less patient, handed me a stick and told me to take the dog with me. But our hound, Rufus, was old, sweet but slow. He'd limp behind me for a few yards, then sit down and look confused, so I stopped dragging him along. Then came the worst day. It was a Saturday in June, warm and wet, and Clay and I were out looking for pokeweed shoots. We'd do that every year, cut them young before they got bitter. He headed uphill, chasing a patch near some deadfall. I stayed low, by the creek that cut through the base of the hollow. I'd heard a frog and was squatting down trying to find it under the rocks. Then I realized it had gone quiet. No birds, no insects, not even the buzzing of gnats around my ears, just the low trickle of the creek. My stomach dropped. I stood up and turned toward the trees. There was someone standing just past the edge of the woods, still, watching, arms down, legs together. I couldn't see their face, but they were pointed straight at me. I froze for a second too long. Then I turned and ran. My foot caught a root almost immediately, and I hit the ground hard, scraped my palms, skinned my knees. I scrambled up and ran without looking back, lungs burning, vision blurry. Clay found me halfway back, shaking and covered in mud. I told him someone was up there. He didn't say much, just kept close the rest of the day. He didn't call me crazy, but he didn't believe me either. That night, just after midnight, we heard knocking on the house, not pounding, not a fist, just 5 slow, spaced-out taps on the kitchen window. No one said anything at first. Dad got up, grabbed the rifle, stepped out onto the porch. Nothing. We didn't sleep much after that. Around 3 a.m., the back door creaked. Then we heard it again. 5 knocks. Not loud. Almost delicate. Like whatever it was wanted us to know it could knock again. And would. After that, it kept happening. Every few nights, always at 3, always 5 knocks. Sometimes on the windows, sometimes the walls. Once on the side of the house right behind my bed. I lay frozen, staring at the ceiling, counting every tap. My parents stopped pretending it wasn't real. Mom started leaving lines of salt across the windowsills. Dad rigged a trail cam on the back porch. It caught nothing. The files were always blank. Then it stopped. Just like that. No more knocks. No more gifts on the porch. Nothing. But then I got sick. It hit fast. Fever so high I couldn't stand. Vomiting everything I tried to eat, weak and sweating through my sheets. The local doctor said it was a virus, but my mom didn't buy it. Said it didn't feel like the flu. Said it felt targeted, like something was trying to hollow me out. She called her aunt, Miss Lenny, who lived up near Hazard. We hadn't seen her in years. She was the kind of woman people only called when they didn't know what else to do. She showed up the next day, no hello, no hugs. Walked straight into my room, stood at the end of the bed and said, "It's not sickness. It's choice." I was too tired to ask what she meant. She placed a bundle of cedar under the bed and rubbed something on my forehead. It smelled like dirt and burnt oil. That night, I dreamed of a stone circle in the woods. Small, neat, a space in the center just big enough for a kid to lie down in. I woke up shivering like I'd been outside all night. Next morning, there were 5 black stones on the porch. We didn't touch them. Miss Lenny told my dad to dig under the house, way off on the far end where we never went. He ripped up some old floorboards and found a shallow spot in the dirt. Buried in it were 5 little dolls, made of corn husks and twine, wrapped in bits of deer hide. Each one had something tucked inside: hair, bone, maybe a tooth. One had a curled up fingernail. We burned them in the fire pit. Miss Lenny made each of us spit into the flames. After that, everything stopped. I moved out the minute I graduated. Got into a school in Indiana, far enough to feel like a clean break. I don't visit much. I lived with my mom in a town called Arden, one of those small Kentucky places that doesn't show up on most maps unless you zoom all the way in. We lived near the edge of what used to be a mining area. The hills around town were full of old shafts and collapsed entrances covered with brush. They had all been sealed off before I was born, but people still talked about them like they were haunted or cursed or whatever. I never bought into that, but I also didn't go poking around. My mom cleaned houses down in Winton, big places owned by people who liked having mountain views without living in the mountains. She'd be gone most of the day, especially in the summer, so I picked up a part-time job at a bait shop off Route 12. It was this lopsided one-story building with a Pepsi machine out front and a porch that creaked even if you tiptoed. We sold night crawlers, fishing poles, and cheap beer. Unofficially, we also sold liquor to anyone who knew what to ask for and slipped an extra 20 under the counter. One Monday in June, my boss hired a new guy. Said his name was Ray. He was in his late 20s, maybe early 30s, and claimed he'd moved up from Edison to get away from the rush. But he didn't look like he belonged anywhere around here. His boots were clean, like cleaner than anyone should be who lives around dirt roads. He spoke like someone who had maybe gone to college or at least spent time outside eastern Kentucky. No drawl, no slang, just this smooth, careful way of talking that made you feel like every word had been rehearsed. People noticed. Arden's small enough that everyone gets sized up whether they like it or not, and Ray got talked about more than most. He didn't chew, didn't hunt, didn't even pretend to like football. My boss didn't care. He said, if the guy shows up sober and doesn't steal, he could be from goddamn Alaska for all I care. Ray and I got paired up for morning shifts twice a week. We'd open together at 6 a.m., which meant standing outside the shop waiting for my boss to unlock the place with keys that stuck and made him curse every single time. Those early hours are quiet. No customers, no cars. Just coffee from the old machine and the sound of cicadas starting up once the sun broke. At first, Ray was just polite, friendly in that default customer service kind of way. Never too personal, never too quiet. But after a few shifts, he started asking me questions. Not small talk stuff, more like, you ever go hiking alone out here, or you think it's possible someone could go missing in those woods and no one would ever know? I thought he was just making conversation at first. Maybe watched too many true crime documentaries. But there was something about how seriously he asked that made it stick in my head. Like he wasn't just wondering, like he already knew the answer. I'd laugh and change the subject, and he'd drop it. But the next shift, there'd be another one. You ever find old trails out there that aren't on any maps? Or think there's still places people haven't stepped in years? One Tuesday, after our shift, he told me about a spring he knew out in the woods. Said it was off the old service roads, past Ashbury Ridge. Supposedly, it was the coldest water he'd ever tasted. Like drinking from a glass made of ice, he said. Real poetic for a bait shop cashier. I asked him how he found it, and he shrugged. Just stumbled on it a while back. Nobody goes there. No trails, just trees and stone. I don't know why I said yes. I was bored, sure, and restless like most 17-year-olds with nothing better to do. But also, part of me wanted to see what he was talking about. People made up all sorts of stuff around here. I figured this was just another tall tale, and maybe I could call his bluff. We clocked out and took his car. That Grand Marquis was way too nice for the roads he drove on. Blue with a shine like it had been waxed that morning. He had nothing in the back seat except a folded blanket and a flashlight. No dirt, no trash, not even dust. That should have registered as weird, but I was still in that mindset where adults seemed like they had things figured out. He drove us past Ashbury, up a narrow gravel road I'd never been on. Eventually, the gravel faded, and the trees started pressing in tighter on both sides. We passed an old cattle gate with most of its posts bent and half the wire sagging, and he pulled over like he knew exactly where to stop. We got out. He climbed the gate easily, like he'd done it 100 times. I followed, trying not to get my shirt caught on the barbed wire. The woods back there were thick. No markers, no trash, no signs of anyone coming through recently. He walked like he had a mental map, never hesitated, never slowed down. I asked how far it was, and he just said, "Not long." We walked for maybe 20 or 25 minutes before I started noticing how still everything was. No birds, no bugs, no sound except our footsteps. The air felt different, too cooler, but not in a refreshing way. More like the temperature in a basement where the sun hasn't touched anything in years. I asked again if we were close. He didn't stop walking, just said, "Almost there. Can't turn back now anyway." He said it flat. No smile. Like it was a fact, not a joke. I stopped. Something in my gut twisted, like I'd missed a step going downstairs. I told him I was going back. He didn't respond. Just kept walking like he hadn't heard me. I raised my voice. "Ray." He turned around, completely calm, and said, "You already came out here with me. Nobody knows where you are. So why go back?" I stared at him. My brain was scrambling to make sense of it. I asked him what the hell that meant, trying to sound steadier than I felt. He smiled, just a flicker. "Nothing. Forget it," he said, and turned away again. I followed, but only because I didn't know the way back. I kept my distance. Eventually, we came to a clearing. It wasn't large, but it was too neat. The trees stopped all at once, like someone had carved out a space. In the center was a ring of rocks, not like a campfire ring with ashes and burnt logs. These were clean, too clean, arranged too perfectly. And right in the middle was a hole. Circular, smooth, maybe 4 feet wide. No bricks, no cover, just dark and deep. Ray crouched next to it, ran his fingers around the edge like he was checking for cracks. "This is it," he said. "Spring's just down there. Want to taste it?" I took a step back. He looked up at me, no expression, just watching. Then he stood and said, "You're smarter than I figured." He stepped toward me. I didn't think. I grabbed the nearest rock and threw it straight at his face. I didn't look to see if it hit. I just ran. The woods were a blur. I had no idea which direction I was going. My chest burned. My legs felt like they were tearing themselves apart. I didn't stop until I heard birds again, heard the wind again, heard anything again. Then I saw the gate. I climbed it, scraped my hand on the wire, didn't care. Got to the road, bent over, gasping. Ray's car was gone. I walked the whole way back to Route 12. Took hours. Some old man in a rust-red truck pulled over and didn't say a word, just unlocked the door and let me in. Drove me straight to town. I don't remember saying thank you. I just remember my hands shaking the entire ride. I quit the bait shop that week. I grew up in a little dip of land folks called Mill Holler, tucked deep past Dunley Ridge in southwest Virginia. That's where my grandparents raised me. My mom was gone before I even started school. No one ever laid it out plain, but the story went that she took off with a trucker from Macon when I was 5 or 6. Grandpa said it once, real simple, like he was reading the weather. Grandma never commented either way. She just kept folding towels. Grandpa told me not to go down there. Once when I was 7, and again when I was 9. He said Eli wasn't right, and that was enough. If someone warns you twice around here, it's not for small talk. Still, I saw the man from time to time. He'd be up near the ridgeline or walking along the creek in his heavy boots, even when it was blistering hot. It was late fall when weird things started happening around our place. I remember because the leaves had already dropped, and Grandma was trying to keep the chickens warm with heat lamps. One morning, we found all the hens dead. Not scattered or dragged off like a fox might do. They were all lying by the fence, heads missing, bodies untouched. The heads were laid out in a row, facing the woods. No blood, no tracks. Just lined up like they were waiting to be counted. A few days later, the chain on the root cellar was busted clean through. Not just broken aged. The links looked like they'd been sitting underwater for 50 years. Grandpa checked the jars down there but didn't say much. That night, he slept in the front room, shotgun across his lap, eyes open longer than usual. Then came the porch incident. I'd gone to bed early, the house real quiet, and woke up to this scraping sound. Not footsteps, heavier than that. It sounded like something was being dragged slowly across the boards outside my window. I froze. Didn't look. Just waited. In the morning, everything was gone. Chairs, buckets, the rug. Just cleared out. Except one thing. Right in the middle of the porch sat one of the hens that had vanished. Alive. Perfectly still. Facing the front door. Like it was waiting to be let in. That's when I started dreaming. Not the kind you wake up laughing from. In these dreams, I was barefoot, walking through the woods, always chasing someone just ahead. I could see their back, or sometimes just their shadow, moving around a bend, ducking behind a tree. I never caught up, but I always followed. When I'd wake up, there'd be mud under my toenails, little scratches along my shins, like I'd run through bramble without noticing. One morning, Grandpa asked if I'd been sleepwalking. He said it calm, without looking at me. I told him no. He nodded, waited, then asked if I'd gone to Eli's. Again, no. He got up, disappeared into the back room, and came out holding an old Bible. Didn't say anything, just lifted my mattress and slid it underneath. After that, I kept the lamp on every night, even though it made it harder to sleep. About a week later, I was out by the woodpile splitting kindling when I heard someone call my name. Not loud, just a soft, repeated voice from the tree line. Beck, 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 Beck. The voice sounded close, but not quite right. Slow, like it was pulling the word apart piece by piece. I froze. My hands went cold. I didn't go toward it, but I didn't run either. Just stood there listening until it stopped. I went inside and locked the door behind me. Grandma was at the stove, but didn't ask what was wrong. I think she already knew. A few days later, I spotted Eli again, standing in the creek with his boots still on, waist deep in water, not moving. He was staring at the far side, not at me, not at anything in particular. I crouched in the brush for 20 minutes and he didn't flinch. When I finally backed away, I saw something hanging from a low branch beside the trail. A rabbit. Gutted, strung up by wire, no head, just hanging there like an offering. That night, I told Grandpa everything. About the voice, the creek, the rabbit. He didn't shout. Didn't look surprised. He asked, "Did you take anything from him?" I said no. He waited, then asked again, slower. "Not food? Not a ride? Not even water?" "No," I told him. I'd never even been close enough to smell his breath. He let out this breath like he'd been holding it for years. "Good," he said. "I've seen what happens when someone owes Eli Dobbins." That was all he offered. Then came Christmas Eve. A blizzard blew in late, and the power went out just after sundown. We piled into the living room with every blanket we had, the fire struggling to keep up. Around 2 in the morning, something started thudding against the house. Not a knock, not even banging. Thudding. Slow, deliberate hits, like someone was throwing themselves against the wall every few seconds. It moved, circling the house, steady as a clock. We didn't speak. I don't think either of us breathed. Grandpa kept the shotgun pointed at the door, finger on the trigger. When it stopped, we sat in silence until sunrise. I checked the snow first. Not a single track, no indentations. Just untouched white in every direction. That spring, while crossing the footbridge over the creek, I noticed something nailed to the underside. A wooden box, weathered gray. It hadn't been there before. Inside were teeth, bigger than a raccoon's. Too uniform for a deer. I ran all the way home. By the time I was 16, Grandpa collapsed behind the barn while digging a drainage ditch. Doctor said it was his heart. I was the one who found him. After that, Grandma went soft and strange. She'd whisper to herself in the hallway, stand at the window for hours with her hand on the glass. Sometimes she'd get up in the middle of the night and walk the house like she was looking for something that had moved. The last night I saw her alive, I awoke to the smell of smoke and went outside to find her burning a pile of papers, clothes, and framed pictures in the old barrel behind the shed. She turned to me and said, "I tried to pay it off." 3 nights later, she died in her sleep. I stayed 6 more months in that house, mostly out of momentum. I didn't see Eli again. No one did. By October, his trailer burned to the ground. No sirens. No one reported it. By the time the mailman passed by, it was just ashes. I packed my things the next day, left Mill Holler before dawn, and never went back. I was 13 when I started cutting through the woods behind our trailer to get across the county line. The gravel road was longer and twisted past a bunch of empty barns and dead soybean fields, but the trail through the trees shaved off a good 20 minutes if I kept a steady pace and didn't stop to look around. It wasn't scenic, it was just faster. I didn't take that path for fun, wasn't sneaking out to meet anyone or trying to skip chores or anything like that. It was just work. Simple, quiet work. There was this man, Mr. Delburn, who lived just over the line on a piece of land most folks didn't bother with. He was older, not ancient or anything, but the type of old where people stopped asking him questions. Word was, he kept to himself and paid cash if you helped him clear brush or stack wood. That was all I needed to hear. Everyone else avoided him, said he was off. That was the word they used, off. Not dangerous, not mean. Just off. Like a light switch that didn't quite click all the way down. But he paid fair, and I wasn't picky. I needed the money more than I needed a good feeling about the guy. His place sat down a slope where the trees grew weird, close together, tangled overhead like they were holding in secrets. Even at noon, it was dim down there, like the sun gave up trying to get through. That first Saturday, when I showed up at the edge of his yard with my sleeves rolled and a dull hatchet slung through my belt loop, he didn't say much, just looked me over, squinted like he was checking my measurements for a box. Then he asked if I had people. I told him I lived with my aunt and 2 cousins up near Huxley Road. He asked if they knew where I was. I said yes. That was a lie. He gave me this small, tight-lipped smile and waved me toward the shed. We started with easy jobs, clearing sticks, hauling branches into piles, burning off the dead limbs in a rusted barrel out back. I came most Saturdays, sometimes Sundays when I could get away without raising eyebrows. He didn't say much when we worked, but every now and then he'd toss a question out like he was trying to catch me in something. What do you like to eat? You ever get lonely out here? You know how to drive? Once, while we were stacking firewood along the back porch, he asked if I'd ever been camping. I said no. He just gave this slow nod and said, "Maybe I'll take you sometime." I didn't know what to say, just stood there with an armload of logs and let the moment pass. That one stuck with me though. Felt strange. Like someone brushing past your back in a crowd when you thought you were alone. Still, I kept going back. I'd count the bills in my pocket all the way home. After a few weeks, he started asking for help with things inside. Mostly the shed. The lock on it was thick like, keep people out thick. Big chain with a padlock that had rust stains all around it. One afternoon, he unlocked it and told me to help him shift some crates. Said not to touch anything I didn't recognize. Inside, it was odd. Not filthy, not hoarder messy, just off. The crates were stacked all over, some with busted corners and old tape marks, some new looking. There was a long table along the back wall, covered in jars. Not food jars. These had dried plants in them, bits of ribbon, tiny doll parts, what looked like bird bones. Things I couldn't put a name to. I didn't ask. Just carried what he pointed at, kept my eyes on the floor. Then came the blue duffel bag. It was a Saturday, and I was halfway through stacking a fresh load of firewood when he came out of the house with it slung over one shoulder. Said he needed it taken down to the creek bed where he'd laid out a tarp. I figured it was just supplies or something for an animal trap, but when I grabbed it, I noticed it was heavier than it looked. Really heavy, and the weight didn't shift. Just sat solid, unmoving, like whatever was inside was packed tight. I asked him what was in it. He said, "Food for the foxes." Just like that, no smile, no wink, just the words. I didn't unzip it, carried it down the hill to where the tarp was stretched out and dropped it where he pointed. Walked back up with my hands empty and my heart thudding a little faster than usual. He paid me $40 and told me to head straight home. That was the first time I didn't eat the sandwich he always offered. From then on, things started feeling more deliberate. Like every question he asked was lining up toward something. About a month later, he said I should stay the night. Claimed it was going to snow and the road might ice over. It was late October. Chilly, yeah, but dry. I told him I'd rather walk. He didn't argue, but he didn't let me take the woods path home anymore after that. Said he'd drive me. His van was this old brown thing with sliding doors and rust spots along the fenders. Inside, there were no back seats, just a folded blanket, a couple of gallon water jugs, and a bucket with a lid. The sliding door didn't have any handles on the inside. I noticed that right away. The first time I got in, I kept my hand on the latch the whole ride. When I got out, I told my aunt I didn't want to work for him anymore. She didn't push, just asked if something happened. I said no, told her he was just weird. That was enough for her. We didn't talk about it again. But a week later, his van showed up, parked at the edge of the woods where the school bus turned around, just sitting there. I walked past without looking. Next day, it was there again. Third day, it was gone. That night, someone knocked on our trailer door. My aunt opened it. Nobody there, no car sounds, no footsteps, just silence. After that, she told us not to open the door for anyone, even if it was the middle of the day. 2 mornings later, we found a box on the porch, taped shut. Inside was a folded flannel shirt, 3 protein bars, and a brand new pair of boots, my size, down to the number. No note. No tag. She didn't hesitate. Hauled it out to the burn barrel, soaked it in diesel, and lit it with a kitchen match. Stood there and watched it burn like it owed her something. That same day, she called my uncle from Grundy. He showed up that evening with his shotgun and an overnight bag and parked himself on the couch for 2 straight weeks. The van never came back after that. I tried to move on, focused on school, stopped going into the woods, started biking to town instead of walking. Thought it was over, until spring came. Someone broke into our backyard shed. The padlock was snapped clean through, nothing taken. But inside, in the corner under an old tarp, we found a plastic storage bin with some odd things in it. A fresh roll of tarp, a handful of bungee cords still looped together, a mason jar filled with pennies. And at the very bottom of the jar, face down, was a Polaroid. It was me, standing beside Mr. Delburn's shed, holding the blue duffel bag. I never even knew he took it. We called the sheriff. He sent someone out to check Delburn's property. Came back and told us the place had been abandoned for months. Said nobody had seen him since before Christmas. I told them what I remembered. They didn't laugh, didn't shrug it off. Just took it all down and said they'd follow up. They found the shed empty. The table was gone, crates too. But under the floorboards they found the chain, buried deep like someone had tried to hide it fast. Down by the creek, they found the tarp spot dug up. They never told us what was buried there. We packed up that summer and moved 3 towns over. Fresh start. I don't tell this story often. I'm 23 now, but this all started when I was 12. We had just moved out to this tiny place called River Hollow, somewhere deep in the hills where even the GPS gives up. My dad packed us up after my mom died. Said we needed a clean break, some quiet away from the city. But even then, I think part of him just wanted to disappear. We weren't from the area. The house had 2 bedrooms, a slanted porch, and insulation so thin you could hear raccoons fighting outside like they were in the next room. The road out front wasn't even paved, just gravel that rattled your bones every time you drove over it. Deliveries didn't happen. The mail guy dropped things at the gas station 10 minutes up Route 32, and that was the end of his route. The first weird thing was small. I was walking home from the bus stop one afternoon, backpack heavy, shoes dusty, and I saw this stack of 5 smooth stones by the mailbox. They were perfectly balanced, not just tossed together, but placed flat side to flat side, like whoever made them had the hands of a surgeon. It didn't look natural. I pointed it out to my dad. He glanced over, grunted. "Probably just some bored kids," he said. "Mountain kids get creative. Nothing to do out here but fish, drink, and mess with people." I shrugged, but the next day, the stones were back. Different ones, larger this time, rougher edges. Still stacked, still balanced in that same eerie way. I remember touching the top one gently with a finger. It didn't wobble. It felt intentional. Dad came out, looked at it for a second, then casually knocked the whole thing over with his boot, said nothing. Just walked back inside like it annoyed him more than anything. Day 4, things shifted. The rocks weren't at the mailbox anymore. I came home and found them on the porch, right in front of our door. Not stacked, just lined up carefully in a single row. Each one had a deep red stripe painted around its middle, not splattered or dripped. Painted. Clean, deliberate, like someone had sat with a brush and taken their time. That night, Dad didn't sleep. He sat out on the porch with a 6-pack and his old hunting flashlight. I heard him muttering under his breath for a while, then shouting into the trees, "You think you're cute? Come on then, I'm right here. I ain't scared of you." I didn't go out there, just stayed in bed, under the blanket, staring at the ceiling, waiting to hear something, anything other than his voice. Next morning, the prints were there. Boot prints, pressed deep into the mud, right below my bedroom window. They weren't fresh from that night, more like the person had stood there just long enough to leave a mark and nothing more. One said, "Not going to or from anywhere, just standing." I told Dad. He didn't even look surprised, just walked to the shed, pulled out a shovel, and leaned it by the front door like he was expecting someone to show up. That same night, the prints came back, same spot. Still just one set. No drag marks, no other signs. Like someone came, stood, and left. And then came the noise. First time I heard it, I thought it was the wind. But it kept happening, exactly at midnight. A slow, scratchy dragging sound across the siding on the house. Like a branch maybe, being pulled from one side of the wall to the other. But we didn't have any trees that close to the structure. Second night, it came again. Same time, same pace, but this time it paused. And after a moment, I heard fast footsteps. Quick, light bolting across the yard and into the trees. Dad took off with the flashlight, yelling. He was gone for about 10 minutes, came back sweating and pale, didn't say a single word. Just sat at the table with his hands wrapped tight around a coffee mug, like he was holding it together. The next day, he boarded up my bedroom window from the outside. No warning, just hammering and cursing. When I asked what he was doing, he said, "You'll sleep better without looking out." That was the whole explanation. I started sleeping with a flashlight under my pillow and a kitchen knife on the floor beside my bed. Told myself it was just some local jerk messing with us because we weren't from around there. Maybe someone didn't like outsiders living rent-free in a house they thought should have gone to family. That made more sense than anything else, and I clung to it. Then one day, Dad didn't come home. His truck was gone when I woke up. No note, no message, no sound during the night. I sat on the couch for hours, watching the clock, listening for that dragging noise. It didn't come. The next morning, I found the truck at the bottom of the ridge, not wrecked, just parked like someone left it there and walked away. Keys still in the ignition, door shut, everything intact, but no sign of him. The sheriff came out, took some photos, asked if he'd been drinking again. I told him, yeah, sometimes. They didn't seem shocked. Said he probably wandered off, maybe into the woods. They looked for him, briefly. Then they stopped. I stayed with my uncle for a few days. But something was pulling at me, and I went back to the house alone. I know, it was stupid, but it felt like I had to. Like if I didn't, whatever this was would just keep following. That's when the photos started. First one was nailed to the front door. A Polaroid of me standing in the kitchen, holding a bowl of cereal. The lights were off. I was looking toward the sink. It had been taken from outside through the window. Second one showed me asleep on the couch, blanket half fallen off. Third was blurrier, taken from behind the blinds, just a shadowy outline of my body. I took them to the sheriff. He looked through them slowly, his mouth pressed into a tight line. He didn't say much. Promised to keep an eye out. I never heard back. I started sleeping with furniture pressed up against every window. Sat with my back to the wall most nights, flashlight in one hand, knife in the other. Then I woke up one night and saw the back door wide open. Not just ajar wide, like someone had walked in or was waiting for me to walk out. The house was dead silent. I didn't move at first. Just lay there under the blanket, completely still. Then I felt something hard under my pillow. It was another photo. This one showed my bedroom door, closed, taken from the hallway. The timestamp in the corner showed it had been taken while I was asleep. That was it for me. I didn't even put shoes on, just grabbed the knife, dropped it halfway out of fear, and sprinted out the front door into the trees. I didn't stop running until I reached the highway. My feet were bleeding, my lungs on fire. But I didn't stop. My uncle picked me up at a diner the next town over. He didn't ask questions. Took me in, put me on the couch, made me tea. I never went back to that house. I couldn't. They never found my dad. Never found the person taking those photos. When they finally searched the house, it was empty, except for a fresh stack of rocks on the porch, taller than before. They reached almost to the doorknob. For a while, I convinced myself it was over. Maybe just some backwoods nightmare I escaped from, but my dad couldn't. I was 22 when all this happened, still living in the house I grew up in, an old split level out where the asphalt ends and the county stops pretending to care. Once the pavement gave way, you had to take a winding gravel road past the Baptist cemetery and 2 rusted-out trailers before you got to our mailbox. Our family had been out there a long time, generations really. Same for most folks around us. People knew each other, or at least knew enough not to ask too many questions. We didn't get strangers out there, and when we did, they usually didn't stay long. Mom died when I was 16, brain aneurysm, fast and out of nowhere. After that, Dad took pipeline jobs. Louisiana, Wyoming, sometimes Texas. He'd be gone for months, then swing back through for a few weeks and head off again. I stayed behind, took care of the house, tried to hold it together. No college, no real job beyond odd hours at the bait shop off Highway 17. Some days I hunted. Other days I split wood or fixed fences that didn't really need fixing. I didn't mind the quiet, not back then. It was early spring when I started helping Miss Ellen. She lived up on Carter Ridge, right near where the old mining trail disappeared into a mess of pine and laurel. Her place was tucked back behind a rusted cattle gate, barely visible from the road. Folks in town said her people used to own a good chunk of that land before the mining company pulled out and let the forest take it back. She'd slipped on some ice the winter before and shattered her hip. By the time I came around, she was getting around with a cane and a walker, and not all that comfortably. I started going up twice a week, Tuesdays and Fridays. Brought her groceries, stacked firewood, helped out however I could. She paid me a little, but mostly I just felt bad leaving her alone up there. First time I pulled into her drive, there was already someone standing on the porch. A man. Tall, thin, maybe mid-30s, wearing this long black wool coat that looked out of place in the warm air. I remember he didn't flinch when my truck crunched the gravel, just stood there, watching me pull in like he'd been waiting. He introduced himself as Clayton, said he was helping Miss Ellen too, just for a while. When I asked how he knew her, he just smiled and said he was an old friend of the family. Something about the way he said it felt off, but I didn't push. He had this voice slow drawl, clipped on the ends like he was mimicking how people talked out here but hadn't quite nailed it. Didn't sound like anyone I'd ever met. But what got me more was the way he talked to me, like he already knew me. "Your dad still working those lines out west?" he asked, right off the bat. "That hound of yours still scared of thunder?" I remember just blinking at him. He even asked about the deer stand I'd built when I was 15, the one I'd camouflaged with old burlap sacks and paint. I laughed, awkwardly. "You must have me confused with someone else," I said. He smiled but didn't laugh with me. "No," he said. "I remember. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of anything he did exactly, but something about him felt wrong in a way I couldn't explain. Like a piece of a puzzle that almost fit, but not quite. My stomach felt tight all night, like I'd swallowed something sharp. The next time I saw Miss Ellen, I asked her about him, just casually, while I was unloading a bag of cornmeal and soup cans. She paused, gave me this strange look, then said, "Old friend of the family," in the exact same tone he had. Then she changed the subject completely, like we hadn't been talking about it at all. But from that point on, he was always there. Every time I came up, sitting on the porch steps, wandering near the tree line, sometimes even splitting logs with that same blank expression like he wasn't even thinking about the task at hand. And I started noticing other things too, like how quiet the woods got when he was around, or how I never actually saw where he went after dark. Miss Ellen didn't have any extra vehicles, and there wasn't a guest room in the house. But he was always there. One afternoon, I stayed later than usual, finishing up some kindling while Miss Ellen rested. The sun was going down behind the ridge, making the woods look darker than they were. I walked around the back to grab another log and froze. Clayton was standing at the edge of the tree line holding one of the rabbits I'd brought Miss Ellen last week. It was dead, skinned, but not cleaned for cooking, just peeled open in a way that looked deliberate. Like someone had done it just to see how it was put together. He wasn't hiding it either. When he saw me, he didn't flinch. "You ever wonder what it looks like," he said, "when something stops pretending to be human?" I didn't respond, just backed away and left. Drove home without saying goodbye. Next day, Miss Ellen called and asked if I could bring her some aspirin and flour. I almost didn't go. But her voice on the phone was different, tight, hurried. When I got there, he wasn't on the porch for once. I walked inside, and Miss Ellen was in the kitchen, wrapped in a blanket with a mug clutched in both hands. Her face looked pale, drawn. She didn't speak until I was halfway through unpacking the bag. "Don't come back here for a while," she said, eyes fixed on the floor. "He's not who he says he is." That's all she said, and I didn't ask for more. I left right then, didn't even look back at the house. That night, just after 11, someone knocked on my door, not loud, not frantic, just a soft, measured knock. Then came the voice. I think we got off on the wrong foot. I didn't move, didn't breathe. A minute later, another knock, lighter this time. "I know you're awake." Saw your lamp, then nothing, no footsteps, no retreating tires, just stillness. I sat against the living room wall all night, shotgun across my lap, staring at the door until the sun came up. In the morning, I checked the property. Nothing missing, no damage. But on the frost-covered windshield of my truck, someone had traced a shape, a perfect circle. Inside that, a smaller one. And inside that, a spiral. I didn't clean it off. Just stood there, staring, until the frost melted. Miss Ellen died the next week. They said she slipped down the back steps and broke her neck. Sheriff Ballard said it looked like an accident. I didn't go to the funeral. I couldn't. A day after she passed, a letter showed up in my mailbox. No stamp, just my name in thick block letters on the front. Inside was one piece of lined paper. It read, "You left the door open. He knows you now." No signature, no return address. I packed a bag that night and moved downstate with my uncle. Didn't even tell my dad. Left the house, the dog, everything. Never went back. Not even to grab clothes. I couldn't. 3 years passed. Then one evening, while flipping through the local news at my uncle's place, I saw a face I'd hoped I'd never see again. Clayton. He'd been arrested near a town in northeast Georgia, different county, no connection to ours. Deputies found him digging a trench around someone's double wide in the middle of the night. When they asked him what he was doing, he said, "So it can't get out again." I was 16 when it happened. We were living in a quiet pocket of southeastern Kentucky, tucked between low hills and thick woods where phone signals gave up about halfway down the drive. Our road had a name, technically, but people just called it the backstretch. My mom worked evenings at a diner just past Riverfield. She'd leave around 4 and get back after midnight smelling like fry oil and peppermint gum. My brother Eli was off in West Virginia laying pipe. I only ever heard from him when he needed something or when he got bored enough to call. That spring, a man moved into the old Danner house, which had been sitting empty for at least 6 or 7 years. You could barely even see it from the road anymore. But then this guy shows up out of nowhere and just starts living there. Fixed it up, apparently. Nobody saw it happen. Just one day the windows were clean and smoke was coming out of the chimney. People talked, of course. A few said he was from Ohio, but that was just guesswork. No one ever confirmed it. He never came into town, not for church, not for groceries, not for the community cleanup day. Never even voted, which got some of the older folks more riled than they'd admit. But no one ever saw anything suspicious. He just kept to himself. I wouldn't have gone near the place if it weren't for a school project. Our history teacher, Mr.Skeleton, came up with this whole local voices assignment where we had to interview someone in the county, capture a piece of Appalachian oral history, as he put it. He even made a little slideshow with audio clips of people telling stories about moonshine stills and coal strikes. Most kids just interviewed their grandparents. My Aunt Terry was the one who suggested I try the guy at the Danner place. She said she'd heard he was some kind of environmentalist into preserving native plants and restoring trails. Sounded harmless enough, and I didn't have any better ideas. So I figured I'd give it a shot. It was a cloudy Thursday when I rode my bike out there, backpack stuffed with a notebook and a little cassette recorder I'd borrowed from the school library. The gravel road to his place was rough, full of overgrown laurel and rusted fence wire. The kind of road that makes you feel like maybe you're not supposed to be there. He was already on the porch when I rolled up, just standing there like he knew exactly when I'd arrive. He had this clean, sharp look press shirt, clean shave, dark jeans that didn't look like they'd ever seen a mud puddle. He looked older up close, probably mid to late 40s, but moved like someone younger. "Mr. Warren," he said when I introduced myself. That's all, no first name. Just that. He didn't seem surprised I was there, just held the door open and gestured me inside like it was routine. The inside of the house was sparse, cold, even though it wasn't a cold day. No couch, no table, just a few folding chairs along the wall and these plastic tubs lined up neat, side by side, filled with dirt and leaves. Some of them had tags stuck in the soil, like plant samples or seed trays. Books were stacked along the floor, not on shelves. All of it felt temporary, like he was either settling in or getting ready to leave. I couldn't tell which. "I prefer to talk outside," he said. "Better light." He led me out the back door to where a narrow path ran into the woods. It was freshly cut with branches still damp from trimming. You could smell the green from the sap. "Been reopening the old trails," he said. "Come see." I hesitated, but I followed. You don't just say no to someone's offer when you're standing in their backyard with a microphone in your bag. We walked in silence, trees closing in on both sides, until we reached this shallow dip in the earth, almost like a natural bowl. It didn't look like much, just soft moss and dirt, but something about it made my skin feel weird, like when your hand goes numb from sitting on it too long. "You ever heard of a voice well?" he asked. I hadn't. He nodded toward the hollow. "It's a spot where sound sinks. Old folks say if you speak into it, the land takes your words. Sometimes it gives you answers, not right away. Days later, but only if you ask the right questions." He didn't smile, didn't act like it was some backwoods joke or ghost story. He said it like he tested it himself. Then he crouched down and started speaking into it. Softly, slowly. I couldn't hear what he said, just this low rhythm of words, spaced out like he was waiting for something between them. He did this for a while, then stood up and looked at me. "Now we wait." I told him I should get going before dark. He didn't argue, just said, "Come back in 3 days. Same time." I didn't plan on it, but by the time I got home, I talked myself out of the weirdness. Told myself he was just eccentric, and I needed the grade. So I went back. This time, the porch was empty. The air felt heavier, like it had rained even though the ground was dry. I knocked, and the door creaked open on its own. Inside, it was darker than I remembered. Even though it was earlier in the day, there was a sticky note on the wall by the door. Yellow, neatly placed. 2 words in black ink, back trail. The path had changed. Widened, like someone had gone through with a machete. Branches slashed, roots pulled up. I stepped onto it and called his name. No answer. A little ways in, maybe 100 yards, I found him. He was kneeling beside that same hollow, but he looked different. His shirt was wrinkled, and there was dirt on his hands, under his nails. He was trembling a little. "I heard it," he said. "Last night, I just stood there. I didn't say anything." He pointed to a small tape recorder on the ground beside him. "Same kind of model I had. It said your name." I told him I had to leave, that this wasn't part of my assignment. I was polite but firm. I wanted out. He didn't try to stop me. Just stayed crouched there, one hand on the recorder like it was all that was keeping him grounded. When I got back to the house, the door was wide open. Inside, everything was gone. The tubs, the books, the chairs, all cleared out. The room was empty except for a long shape in the center of the floor, covered with a blue tarp. I didn't lift it. I didn't even get close. I ran my bike down the slope, barely staying on the path, and didn't stop until I reached the BP station on Route 80. I called my mom from the payphone out front, hands still shaking. 2 days later, I overheard my Aunt Terry on the phone. One of the deputies had gone up to check the place. He called her that night because she was the one who'd given me the idea to go there in the first place. He said the house was abandoned. Not just empty abandoned, like someone had stripped it clean and disappeared. No furniture, no tarp, no man. But out back, the ground where the hollow had been, torn up, turned like someone had dug and filled it in again. But there were no sinkholes out there anymore, just smooth dirt and a few scattered stones, like it had always been that way. I wrote my report on my great-granddad instead. A coal miner with missing fingers and a story about surviving a mine collapse. Got a B+. My brother Calder had just turned 20 and moved back in with us after dropping out of school. Our mom didn't care what the reason was. She was just happy to have him home again. She kept saying the mountain air would settle him down, clear his head. She believed in that kind of thing. My dad, though, he had a different take. He kept watching Calder like he was waiting for him to slip up again. He didn't say it out loud, but you could see it in the way he talked around him instead of to him. We lived about 20 minutes outside a town called Graymont, near the edge of Laurel County, just deep enough into the hills that it felt like a world apart. One road in, gravel most of the way, and lined with switchbacks sharp enough to make you question your brakes every winter. Nearest neighbor was a quarter-mile up the ridge, a quiet guy who sold firewood and moonshine and mostly kept to himself. Calder and I used to run the woods behind the house when we were kids. There's an old trail back there that winds past the ruins of a coal tipple, just some rusted beams, a few concrete chunks, and then curves around a thick cluster of trees we always called the tunnel. Not an actual tunnel, just a stretch where the branches folded in so tight the sun barely got through. Even in summer, it stayed cold in there. As kids, we dared each other to go deeper in, made up stories about monsters and ghosts. Nothing original, just the kind of dumb things brothers do to scare each other. But that trail changed the year Calder came home. It started small. One afternoon, I was walking the path alone, cutting through the backwoods just to get out of the house for a while, and I saw them. 3 wooden steps, just sitting there dead center in the trail, no handrail, no platform, no sign of anything that should have been connected to them. Just 3 rotting wooden stairs, rising out of the dirt like they'd always been there. I stopped and stared at them for a while. They weren't particularly big, looked like something you'd find outside an old trailer or maybe the back door of a shed. I figured maybe someone had dumped construction junk out there, though why they'd haul it all the way down that trail I couldn't imagine. Still, I didn't think much of it, just walked around and kept going. A week later, I was back on that trail. Same spot. But now the stairs were off to the left, moved maybe 15 feet from where I'd seen them before. Still the same shape, same sagging wood, same iron nails curling out like claws. But the shift unsettled me. I stood there for a long time, staring at them, trying to convince myself I'd misremembered the original spot. Eventually I left, and I didn't say anything to anyone. Then one morning, Calder walked into the kitchen looking like he hadn't slept. He poured himself coffee without saying a word. Stood by the sink, staring out the window like he was waiting for something to move out there. Then he asked, "You been messing around out back?" I told him no. His jaw tightened. He didn't speak for a second, just tapped his finger against the mug. Then he said he'd seen the stairs too, but when he found them, there were 4. That stopped me cold. He said these ones looked different. New. Clean wood, no moss, no rot, and carved into the risers were these deep, circular patterns. Symbols, he called them, but not like anything decorative. These looked burned in, precise, intentional. It didn't make any sense. He asked me to go with him and look again. When we did, the stairs were there, 4 steps now, and he was right. They looked like they'd just been built. No rust, no decay. I reached out to touch one and pulled back. The wood was cold and smooth, like something in a showroom. We tried taking photos. We dug out this old Canon camera from a drawer, took shots from every angle. The first batch wouldn't even transfer to the computer. Next time the files came out corrupted, just static green flashes, or in some cases just black. One photo crashed the whole laptop. Dad chalked it up to a busted SD card or a virus. We didn't argue, but Calder became obsessed. One night, he told me he was going to sleep out there. Said if someone was screwing with us, he'd catch them in the act. I tried to talk him out of it, told him it wasn't worth it. He just rolled his eyes and said I was being dramatic. He packed a sleeping bag, a flashlight, and a granola bar. That was it. Next morning, he was gone. Dad and I went looking when he didn't come back for breakfast. We found his sleeping bag still zipped up, neatly laid out at the base of the coal tipple. His boots were sitting next to it, lined up side by side like someone had placed them there intentionally. No other sign of him, no prints, no drag marks, no broken branches. And the stairs? Now there were 6, taller than before. I remember touching the bottom step again, almost without thinking, and it was warm, like body heat warm, like someone had just been standing on it. We called the sheriff. They brought dogs, volunteers, ATVs. Searched the woods for 2 days. Nothing. Not even a thread of his jacket. A few people whispered that maybe he'd run off again, taken off in the middle of the night. But I knew better. Calder wouldn't do that to Mom. Not this time. After that, I stopped going outside. Barely talked. Spent days just sitting in the living room, watching the edge of the woods like something might crawl out of them if I looked away. We lived just outside a little town called Dunnell, southern West Virginia, tucked between the hills where the trees outnumber people 10 to 1. We had a single gas station, a diner with more dust than customers, and a volunteer firehouse that mostly responded to brush fires and the occasional flipped ATV. Our trailer sat at the very end of a rutted lane, pressed right up against a wall of woods locals called the Belson Ridge. My older brother Nate used to say it had something to do with a family that went missing up there decades ago. But he also once tried to convince me our neighbor raised coyotes in her basement, so I learned early not to take him too seriously. The night this happened, it was just me at home. Mom was pulling an overnight at the nursing home in town, like she did most weekends, and Nate had taken off with some friends to drink beer out by the quarry. That left me with the trailer to myself. It wasn't unusual. We were all used to fending for ourselves. I remember the night being sticky and still. One of those July evenings where the air doesn't move and the bugs sound like they're right in your ear. I microwaved a frozen pizza, flipped through TV channels, and scrolled through an old magazine until I realized I wasn't really watching or reading any of it. I felt jittery, cooped up. The kind of restless that makes you pace the room for no reason. That's when I decided to go for a walk. Not far, just up the trail to the deer blind. I'd done it 100 times before, mostly during the day, but I figured it'd be fine. I didn't bring my phone, which I regret. I just grabbed a flashlight, slipped on a hoodie, and stepped out the back door. The trail behind our place starts out wide enough to drive a four-wheeler on, but narrows fast. Within 30 yards, you're in deep, surrounded by thickets of green briar and old trees leaning too close together. Even with the flashlight, the dark soaked in quick. It wasn't pitch black, but close. I moved fast, mostly out of habit. I knew the path. I could have walked it blind, or I thought I could. I made it to the deer blind in under 5 minutes. It was up on stilts, maybe 6 feet off the ground, with a short ladder and a plywood platform. The inside smelled like damp wood and dried leaves. I sat down, leaned back, and just listened. The night sounds were out in full force at first. Crickets, cicadas, the occasional owl. It was weirdly comforting. But after 10, maybe 15 minutes, the background noise started to fade. Not all at once, more like a slow draining. Like someone was turning the dial down, bit by bit. First the bugs, then the birds, then nothing. It wasn't dead silent exactly, but it was wrong. The kind of quiet that makes you feel like something's watching, even if you can't explain why. I sat up straighter, clicked off my flashlight, and leaned toward the open slot in the blind. That's when I saw movement, just a flicker off the trail, maybe 50 feet out. At first I thought it was a deer, or maybe a stray dog. But then I saw how it moved. It was a man, tall, too thin. He wasn't running, but his steps were sharp, like he was trying to move quietly and failing. His arms hummed strangely, elbows bent too far out. Every step seemed measured, like he was mimicking walking more than just doing it. I dropped low, heart pounding. I couldn't see his face, couldn't even tell if he was looking my way. But something about him was off. He wasn't on the trail. He was weaving through the trees, brushing past branches like they weren't there. He stopped, turned slowly, then crouched. That's when I started sweating. He was scanning the woods. I felt sure of it. I couldn't tell if he'd seen me, but my body acted like he had. I held my breath, trying not to make a sound. He stood again, then moved uphill, closer to where the trail loops around back toward our yard. Not directly at me, but close enough that I didn't want to be anywhere near him. I waited a full minute after he disappeared into the trees, then climbed down and took the lower trail. It runs behind the ridge and drops toward a dry creek bed we sometimes used as a shortcut. My plan was to follow that, loop around by the Holly's shed, and slip back into our yard from the far side. I moved quiet, keeping the flashlight low. I was halfway down when I heard it. Footsteps, not loud, not crashing through brush, but steady, and too close, off to my right, pacing with me. When I slowed, they slowed. When I stopped, they stopped. I turned off the flashlight, crouched, and listened. Nothing. I waited, then slowly pushed into the brush, cutting toward the creek bed. It was rough going, twigs snapping, mud grabbing at my shoes. But I kept going until I reached the rocks. From there I crawled, literal hands and knees crawling. My legs were shaking, and my hands were slick with sweat and dirt. I followed the creek bed until it curved behind the Holly's old shed. Their property butted up against ours, separated by a low wire fence and a line of trees. I figured I'd peek around the shed, dash across the grass, and be inside in less than 10 seconds. But when I rounded the corner, I froze. He was in our yard, standing right at the edge where the trees end and the lawn begins, not moving, just staring at our back door. My back door. I dropped flat. I couldn't see his face, but his posture was locked, tense, like he was waiting for someone to come out. He didn't fidget or shift his weight, just stood there like he'd been placed. Then he moved. 1 step, 2, slow, careful, still staring. I pressed my face into the dirt, barely breathing. Another step, then he stopped again. He stood there a long time, long enough that my legs started cramping and I felt lightheaded from holding still. Then, out of nowhere, he snapped his head to the left, like a noise had caught his attention. Without hesitation, he turned and vanished into the trees. No running, no panic, just gone. I waited another 5 minutes before I bolted across the grass and locked myself inside. Every window, every door. I even dragged a chair in front of the back door and sat there until the sun came up. I didn't sleep that night. I just waited till sunrise. That was the last time I ever set foot in the Velsen Ridge alone. I don't even look at that trail anymore.